Hi, welcome to another episode of MYD Global. I'm your host, Leanne Hack-McCarty. When you look at incarceration of women in the U.S., you could almost deem it as a disaster. In this episode, I speak with Topeka Sam. Topeka is an unbelievable woman with a great personal testimony as to how incarceration impacted her, but more importantly, what she's done to help give hundreds of other women a second chance. So stay tuned as I talk to Topeka about her organization, Ladies of Hope Ministries, and what they're doing in communities across the U.S. and beyond in order to help put women back into communities and help them succeed. Hi, Topeka. How are you today?
I'm well. Thank you so much, Leanne.
Well, thank you so much for doing this. I had a chance to hear you recently on a webinar, and I was fascinated by not only your life story, but the work that you're doing now. So before we get started, can you tell the audience just a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I mean, there's a lot of bit about myself, but to try to condense it just a little bit, I am the founder and executive director of the Ladies of Hope Ministries, which is an organization with an epic vision to end poverty and incarceration of women and girls. And I founded that organization through my personal lived experience on top of a prison bunk in federal prison back in 2014. But in 2012, I was actually sentenced to 65 months. Well, it ended up being 65 months in the end. It started at 130 months. Thank God I was given grace and gotten a sentence reduction, ended up doing 3.5 years opposed to 10 years, 10 months on a federal drug conspiracy charge. But prior to my incarceration, I came from an incredible background, 2-parent home. Parents were together 58 years before my father passed last year. Given every single opportunity in the world, my parents worked very, very hard to afford myself and my siblings something different than what they actually had, which was really humble beginnings. And so we were raised in Manorville in New York, which is further out Suffolk County. Big house, big pool, only Black family in our neighborhood. But this was my life. It was who I was. These were my friends. I knew nothing other than that. I was very ambitious in school, captain of every team, president of every club. I joke and say, which was true, I was president of the Spanish club and didn't speak any Spanish. That just shows to the level of ambition and drive that I've always had, even as a little girl. And it was time for me to go to college in 19, I'm not going to date me. When it was time for me to go to college, I wanted to go to a historically Black college. Having been the only Black child or family brought up in my neighborhood. So therefore, it was the same in school. I wanted to go to a Black university because I wanted to be around other kids and people that were like me. And so I got to Morgan State University in Baltimore, Maryland, and life was very, very different. I'm now in the city, having been raised in the suburbs, and being one of many versus, not. And, being really told that my swag was different. They said, I talk like you're white, you think you're better than us, or you're pretty to be dark skinned. And I'm like, what is all this about? I'm Black like you. And it was this identity, really a sense of connectedness, of belonging that I was looking for. And people say you hung with the wrong crowd. No, I hung with people who were not like me. So I wouldn't say that they were wrong. I would say that their beginnings and their lifestyle were very different than what I knew. And I became attracted to that because it was something different. I felt connected to that because it was where I felt accepted. And then I began dating, as a young woman, and started dating guys who were not at school. They were from Baltimore City and they sold drugs, and they were very different than, the doctor, the lawyer, or the entrepreneur that my parents thought that I would be with. And so it was this journey that I had gone on, a lifestyle I began to live. Eventually found myself selling drugs, never used. And this went on up into my 30s. I was division chairperson for Amtrak from New York and DC. I owned a business and wanted to start another business. And I found myself arrested in Virginia, Hanover, Virginia, in the middle of nowhere, and put into a county jail in 2012.
Wow. I mean, what a story, really. And the fact that you're able to tell your story and people hear it and go, wow, if it could happen to her, it could happen to me, my family, my kids. None of us are immune. And situations sometimes, I mean, you go through situations to learn something and hopefully share and help others not have to go through the same thing. And obviously you're using your story for the good. So one of the things I know on your website, you talk about some statistics of the criminal justice system. I wouldn't mind if you could just speak to some of those, some of the ones that you're very well familiar with, in particular when it comes to women incarcerated.
Yeah, for sure. When, I always talk about how inside there was like a bevy of beauty and a bevy of brilliance, and I didn't really understand. And I thought that if people understood what I saw, that, the US wouldn't incarcerate as many people, but especially women at all. And people don't realize that 85% of all women who are incarcerated are mothers, that 95% of all women who are presently incarcerated are survivors of sexual trauma and violence or domestic violence. And that's just numbers that is reported, because there's still stigma associated with sexual trauma, violence, rape, abuse. And so women don't talk about that often. When you look at mental health issues, over 95% of all women who are incarcerated suffer with one level or another of mental health issues. So whether it is something like anxiety or depression to something more severe like schizophrenia, every person has suffered some way with those type of traumas, mental health issues, substance misuse. Over 85% of women incarcerated have substance misuse issues, and over 90% have been subjected of some type of poverty. And so whether it's through education, whether it's through socioeconomic, whether it's from, just gender biases, all the things that women face. And it was when I was in prison, it wasn't what I saw on TV. Everyone there, wasn't mentally challenged, if you will, have severe mental health issues or struggling with severe substance issues, or were just deserved to be there. There were women I was incarcerated from women who had the most humble beginnings and were displaced and living homeless, or victims of sex trafficking and human trafficking, to women who were doctors, lawyers, senators, and judges. And so there was a range. It was irrespective to whether it was a Black woman or a white woman, or a brown woman or an Asian woman. It just did not matter. The age, I was incarcerated with girls as young as 18 to grandmas, abuelas, as we called them, who were in their 70s. And just to think the length of sentences that women have, it's been an 800% uptick of the increase of women in incarceration. And right now, today, women are being sentenced to life at double the rate of men today. Wow. That's a statistic now. And it's increasing. While the prison population is decreasing, the incarceration of women is still increasing.
So as far as women, the challenges that women face both inside when they're incarcerated, as well as coming from the outside, can you speak to what some of those unique challenges might be?
Yeah, healthcare. I think about that. Number one, I was on a panel yesterday and we were talking about how women, prisons aren't made for anyone, as far as I'm concerned, but they definitely were not made with women in mind. So you think about from going in, and the uniforms that you wear, they're masculine. They don't fit because they're not fit for a woman's physique. When you think about toilet paper, often they would give you a roll of toilet paper. And depending on what time of month it is, you're not going through a roll of toilet paper, right? In a month, more or less a day, in some cases. When you think about pads and tampons, right? We had to pay for that. And in some prisons, you still do. We did legislation where we passed 15 pieces of legislation locally, and then a federal bill that actually focuses on making sure that women have personal hygiene products at no cost to them. The fact that we had to get a bill put in place that would not charge women to pay for pads and tampons while incarcerated is ridiculous, but we did.
Mhm.
When you think about panties, I talked about how in the county jail, I was fortunate enough because I had friends and family and resources that I could pay for a pack of 3 Fruit of the Loom underwear, bloomers, for about, I think it was $11 for a pack of 3, where women had to do what they call dumpster dive. And they would have to go into a big bin and look for panties that were recycled and reused, that you would look in the crotch to see where there was less stains and soils. And that was what they had to put on. And to think, men, as I say, they can wear boxers or they can free ball, right? They wear nothing. Women, we can't do that. And
Yeah.
so when you think about just the basics, right? Outside of the fact that women are primary caregivers of dependent children, and how the separation of family happens during incarceration, and then what happens to the children when the mothers are absent from the home. They go into foster care, which then sometimes leads them to victims of abuse and other things. I think about education. Men's facilities there offer things like steel workers often, getting their CDL, general contractor, plumbing, HVAC, things that they can use to come home. Women, where I was, they offered plastic canvas, beading, knitting, and crochet. Right. So I'm like, you don't know how to be a lady. This is how you're going to do it. I remember writing an op-ed that said, just shut up and knit. Right. Like, because I'm like, what is this going to do? How is this going to help me have new transferable skills? It's going to get me ready when I get back home to be in a competitive place where people have, master's degrees. Even some of my friends with their master's degree couldn't find a job. Right. So as a person with a conviction, what does that look like? So, I can go on and on, but these, I think, are tangible examples for people to hear that you do not think about. You think, oh, they're in prison, they get everything they need. The state is paying for that. They get 3 hots and a cot, people are saying, but 3 hots is not 8 pieces of tricolor bologna, 4 pieces of white bread, over outdated milk. Like, that's not, and this is what they give you, right? And so this idea, of being taken care of and prison is safe, and at least it's absolutely a lie.
Yeah. So tell me about the organization you founded. I know you're a serial entrepreneur. You've got a lot of things that you're involved in, but Ladies of Hope Ministries, can you tell me a little bit about the organization?
Absolutely. So, as I said, our vision is epic, to end poverty and incarceration of women and girls globally. We feel that you can hold people accountable while also healing them from harm. That, typically with women are criminalized for poverty. Again, I talked about sexual trauma, violence, substance misuse, gender bias, misogyny, all the things, these systems that happen against women. And this is how we end up really looking at how to change that. And so that's one piece of it. The other, so we look at the work from 2 pillars. So one is direct service and sustainability, and the other is advocacy and engagement. And so we do the direct service work by looking at housing, food, and a job, equitable opportunity and employment. That what we understand is I can't advocate for myself or anyone else unless my basic human rights are met. And so we have Hope House, a safe housing space for women and girls coming home from prison and jail. We have that right now in the Bronx, a house. We have one in New Orleans, Louisiana, and we're scaling that to 6 cities in the Caribbean this year. And then we have our Angel Food Project, which is a partnership with Whole Foods, Instacart, Fairway, Wegmans, and other supermarkets, where we give out bags of donations of food to families impacted by incarceration and COVID as well. Last month alone, we actually supported 300 families with that program. We have our Pathways for Equity program, where we train on personal and professional development, and we train women on how to get back into corporate America. And we ask corporations, like, look, how do you define diversity and inclusion? We need to also include people with colorful pasts and lived experiences, not just based on, again, gender identity, ethnicity, race, or religion. And then our advocacy work, we have Face of Women in Prison program, which is a global speakers bureau where we've trained over 50 women to date on how to use their voice to empower themselves. One, to understand that no is a complete sentence, and you can say that confidently, which would, I guess, help a lot of us in our lives. But outside of that, also that you can get paid as public speakers. Often people are asked to share their experiences and they are not compensated. And this is work. It's work to relive your trauma. It's work to talk about the experiences that you have. And people should value that and value your story. And then next we have our EPIC ambassadors work, which is training women on how to draft legislation, partnering with local elected officials, and then getting them to pass bills that they feel will help to ending poverty and incarceration and the criminalization of women and girls, and then get them registered as lobbyists, another pathway for a career. And then lastly is our EPIC reproductive justice program, which we launched recently, our doula program, a doula initiative that we're training formerly incarcerated and non-binary birth workers to go into prisons and also to then advocate to make sure that Medicaid and Medicare and healthcare providers are allowing them to build them so that they can provide services to women who are presently incarcerated and in community who would not be able to support that. And that program is also building out as well.
That's great. I mean, you're taking a really nice holistic approach because it's not just one thing. If you address this piece, there's all these other pieces. And it's funny, years ago, I was helping women with addiction problems. And I remember, people are quick to blame them and just say, well, just stop drinking. It's your problem. It's your choice. But I often found when you start to get to know the woman more, it's like an onion. You just peel one piece and you realize, oh, didn't know that. And then another piece and another piece, and you speak to them, whether it's sexual abuse, whether it's, whatever their background is. It's a series of traumas that often take them somewhere.
That's right.
It's not just one. Yeah, we all make bad decisions. And sometimes I might make the same as someone else and they end up in jail and I don't. I mean, sometimes it's so strange. One of the things I saw a webinar when you talked about your Pathways program. Yes. One of the things you talked about at the time was employers having a check the box when it says, do you have a criminal record? I wouldn't mind if you just spoke to that element a bit, because I actually found that quite fascinating. I had never thought of that issue before.
Oh yeah, I mean, we don't when it doesn't impact us, right? Like, whether we think about housing, they ask if there's been a conviction. If you think about, to your point, employment opportunities, they ask if you have a conviction. If you think about education, even on college applications, they ask if you've had a conviction. And all these are barriers, and these are ways that people, they just they'll lie and say no, and then it comes back and they get terminated for being dishonest, or they don't check the box and then they fear, or they do and they're then discriminated against. And there has been laws that have been implemented around checking the box on employment applications, but everyone still consents to a conditional background check. And so you will be offered a conditional offer of employment. Most employers are at-will employers, so they can, employ or not at will. And then what ends up happening is a person, right, they end up working and getting this job and doing great. And 6 months to a year later, the background check comes back and they get terminated. And it happens over and over again. Not the fact that they've been working there and they've done an incredible job. Some people have even got employee of the month while being there. But as soon as this background check comes back, you're out. And a lot of times that's based on who's in HR, who is the manager, their own personal implicit biases and what they feel. And so they don't even give a person an opportunity. But people need to understand that 95% of all people who go inside will come home one day. And how do you want people to come back? You want them to come back being stronger, being better, making better choices, being healthy, and having opportunities. Because if we think about public safety, if I don't give a person a job, if I do not give them a safe place to live, if I'm not giving the ability to eat healthy food so that they can grow and sustain and their mind can be clear, if I'm not giving them access to proper medical health care and all of these things, then what do I expect, right? And then who's really guilty? If a person ends up doing something in order, like a crime of survival, right? Like, and anyone, if you cannot work in order to earn, what are you going to do? You're going to find a way in order to make sure yourself, your children, are safe. And that's just like, I mean, I'm not a doctor, but I would think that's just like, the animalistic or, response to things, right? Like, I gotta eat. You see
Yeah.
dogs walking outside. If you don't feed the dog is gonna go and find some food, right? Like, it just is what it is. And so
Yeah.
I think that we have to really, really look at just how we're treating people, how our own biases are showing up, and how we can be of support, because it shouldn't just be those of us that have lived a particular experience that wants to support. It needs to be all of us that understand that our lives work, and why we are here and born into this world is to serve. And once you understand that it's that you can make better choices, and how you choose to serve people in your community.
Well, and I think it's organizations like yours, a voice like yours, and the other women that challenge those myths and perceptions that some of us have. When I've never thought of it before, I've never had to, and yet when you start to talk about it, you go, well, that makes perfect sense. Why isn't that happening? But until you know about it, you can't make change.
That's it. You know better, you do better. So, and people like you, right? Like, you use your platform to elevate these issues, so that when people don't know, they have an opportunity to do like you. Wow, I didn't know. I would love my audience to be able to hear this, so that then they may be able to support and make change. And support looks different, right? You can go out and say, I want to know how I can help the person who I might walk past every single day who's homeless, right? There's one lady I used to walk past every single day. And one day, I mean, I will always say good morning, that's just who I am. But one day I stopped her and asked her if I could help her with something. And she was like, no, she felt safer being on the street. And then I never saw her again. Like, she would go, and then I'm like, wow, like, what happened to her? Where is she? Is she okay? And asking the people in the neighborhood, and nobody knows. And, we have to really think about that. Like, we have to take care of each other. And that's just what it's about.
So if someone wants to get involved with your work, how can they get more involved?
Yeah, so they can either go to the website, thelohm.org. They can text to get more information and sign up to our newsletter, and also donate. They can text the word the LOHM 2021 to the number 41444 and receive information, donate. They can do fundraisers on behalf of us. They can make donations on behalf of loved ones and legacy. They can volunteer. There's many different things that they can do, and we have different campaigns that we're running all the time. Again, 7 programs scaling to 7 cities. So the support is necessary, opening up additional opportunities for, any one of our members to share their experience. There's so many ways that people can get involved. They'd be surprised. We had a young girl who came from great, parents and family and financial industry. She worked for a hedge fund, and she came and visited Hope House in the Bronx. And she was like, oh my God, I want to do something, 16. And I was like, okay, well, let's think about it. And she created an entire program called Study Buddies that we're launching in the fall for Epic Youth Program, which is actually focusing on like people from her school. They go to boarding schools, affluent schools, have support. They want to support kids who have incarcerated parents, to help them be able to get the type of scholarships and opportunities and access that they have. And I thought that was incredible. Here's a young girl who was like, wait, I need to do something. But it also spoke to her parents, right? And so I think that, when we open up the opportunity and don't shy away from things, we exclude our children. I was, for sure, from the world, and thinking that it's protecting them. And then when they get in the world, they see the world very differently. And how do you then afford those opportunities for your children now, and letting them know that, hey, there's another part of the world out here, right? And that they're living this type of way. And, it is our responsibility to bring support to them too.
That's great. Well, Topeka, as we wrap up, is there anything else you want to say before we close?
Well, thank you, Leanne. I'd just like to say that to you. I appreciate you and your support of the organization, and just, being aware that something needs to change, aware that you have an opportunity to share that change, and aware that, we have to give in the world in order to give to others, because that is our goal and our role in life. And so I just thank you for giving me this opportunity to share my experience, to share the incredible epic work that we do at Ladies of Hope Ministries, and hopeful that more people through your audience will want to help and support us too. So thank you.
Well, I'll share your website and all the ways to get in touch with you. And thank you for your personal testimony, really, that impacts far beyond what, just in writing can do. But as you speak to it, I think that you will continue to touch a lot of lives. So thank you, and wishing you all the best in the future.
Thank you. God bless you and all of us. Thank you.
Thank you.